in order. Thank you, Antoinette, for having me here tonight. It's a pleasure to be with the folks of Cork and Fork again. And I would like to thank also International for bringing the wines to the DC market. I don't know if Andrew will be connecting tonight, but he won't. Okay, but I'll chat. I'm Sebastiano Caponi. I am the winemaker and manager of the family estate for this generation of family. Family is quite old. Let me see, just to show you how old it is, we can take a picture here. So here we go. Here we go. Share the picture. Do you see it? See this guy? Can you see it, Antoinette?
Nothing. I just see your folder.
Okay, here we go. Better now?
Yes, much better.
Okay. So this is Piero Capponi, who is one of the most important members of my family. We are a family from Florence. This statue is actually on the Uffizi Gallery. It's one of the four defenders of Florence. Piero Capponi was confronted the King of France in 1494 during the siege of Florence, and he was very well known for this episode because the king threatened to invade Florence with his army, and Piero Capponi's famous reply was, "If you're going to blow your trumpets, we're going to toll our bells and call the population to defend the city." And it resulted that this exchange resulted into a truce and then into an armistice. So the king did not invade the city and left the city unscathed. Just to tell you where I'm from Florence, which is not Florence, Kentucky, but Florence, Italy. And my family has been in Florence for a very long time. We started shop in Florence in 1215. We were silk traders and wool traders, and then we became bankers. And with the banking business, we made our wealth, and the trade business as well. And since we were from the southern part of Florence, it was only natural for us to start buying properties in the southern part of the countryside. And in 1524, we purchased Villa Calcinaia. I have actually the map that was attached to the contract. Let me share screen this. This is the map. So, share. Here's the map. Here's the map. So there is the Calcinaia, which is this building here, and then we have San Pier Alpino, and then we have the house of Sepale, and the house of Bastignano, which is the house that gives the name to one of the wines we'll be tasting tonight. And it was already ruined in 1524, so the house does not exist anymore. But the farmstead, the holding still holds the name. And as you can see, our neighbors, for people, if there's any of you from New Jersey or New York, probably will know this name because it's the Verrazzano, which were our neighbors back in those days. And those are the family who were Giovanni Verrazzano, who founded the Hudson Bay, and whose the bridge that connects Staten Island to New York is dedicated to. So long history, I'd say. The estate always been making wine. The wine was usually sold in bulk. There was very little or in fiasco. The fiascos were invented around the beginning of the 18th century, beginning of 1700s, to ship the wine to England, for example. And the fiasco was invented because it would carry better than the barrels, because we had to, in order to ship to England, we had to go through Gibraltar and all the way up to UK, United Kingdom. And so if you were shipping with barrels, most of the wine will evaporate because of this long trip. So by shipping with the fiasco and by putting a little bit of olive oil on top of the wine, and then we put a straw inside in order to preserve the wine will be much better, will come in much better condition to the English market. I'm talking about the English market because that market was very important for us for the Chianti Classico, for Chianti, well, at the time was called Chianti, because Queen Anne was a big fan of the wine, and we had some problems in the English market because there was a lot of fake Chianti in the market. And so in 1716, the Grand Duke Cosimo III established by decree the areas of area production of Chianti, making this the first appellation by decree in the world. To understand where Chianti is and where Calcinaia is, I have to show you another map, and it's probably just going to be this one here. Let me show you. This is the presentation right there. Yeah, okay, so how do I get this? Here we go. I want this thing here. Screen sharing, you share. Yeah, this is the one. So you can see, oh, I went too far. You can see, how do I get this out of the way? So this is Tuscany, and in the middle of Tuscany, there's this little thing called Chianti, which is this red part. And as you can see, Chianti is between the city of Florence and the city of Siena. And the territory is not very big. It's only, as you can see, it's only 70,000 hectares, so 140,000 acres, and only about 14,000 occupied, 14,000 acres occupied by vineyards. So the beauty of Chianti is that there's a lot of things going on, not just vineyards, but there's olive groves, woodlands, and rolling hills. This is to explain where the wines are from. So the wines are from a specific region in the middle of Tuscany, which is in the central north part of Italy. Why is not the wine called not Chianti, is called Chianti Classico? Well, it's a long story. It all goes back to the fact that there were a lot of imitators of this wine because this wine was very popular. And the problem started to increase even more with the immigration to the United States. And the immigration to the United States, as you know, was Italian immigration was big in the end of the 19th century. And you will have a lot of fake Chianti in the United States because the wine was produced also in the neighboring areas, and it was produced in the same fashion and it would leave the Italian harbors and will take the name from the harbor where it came from. So you had United States, you'll find Chianti Naples, you can find Chianti Genoa, depending where the harbor was. And the wine lost so much its sense of place and became a style of wine that even nowadays you can go to a local Publix or Piggly Wiggly or Harry's Teethers, and you can go to the jug section and you can buy a jug of Carlo Rossi Chianti, you can buy a jug of Francia Chianti, and that Chianti is not made in Tuscany, it's not made in Italy, it's made in Central California. Now, the producer from the regional area did not start to fight the practice until 1924, which was unfortunately too late. Just to give an example, French producer from Champagne started fighting the practice of other regions calling the wine Champagne in 1844. They won the first lawsuit against Loire in that year. So we acted too late. When we founded a consortium for the defense of typical wine of Chianti, it was only in 1924, and we adopted one thing to distinguish ourselves from the rest of the Chianti, which was the Black Rooster, which is the system for you, and now we'll talk about the first wine, to recognize a true Chianti. You always have to look for the chicken, okay? The Black Rooster is the symbol of Chianti Classico, and if it is a Chianti Classico, it has to have the Black Rooster. The name Chianti Classico was given to us, the adjective Classico was given to us in 1932, when the Italian state established that Chianti could be produced elsewhere in Tuscany, but the original area could get her own specification by calling it Chianti Classico. So Chianti Classico comes from the region of Chianti. Chianti comes from the neighboring area of Chianti. So it's very complicated, but Italians like to complicate things. We'll start with the first wine. It's called Piegaia. It's a Chianti Classico. As I said, Chianti Classico has to be a minimum of 80% Sangiovese and a 20% of other red varietals. In this case, Piegaia Chianti Classico, it's 90% Sangiovese with a 10% Merlot. The winery has been run by me since 1992, and I've converted everything to organic farming in 1997. So all the wines you'll be tasting tonight are certified organic. And the way I do wine is I try to keep all my vineyards separate. So I vinify every single vineyard separately, and then after a year and a half, I taste blind all the different vineyards and I decide what the blends are going to be. For the Chianti Classico Piegaia, which I believe this is a 15 vintage, and I add a little bit of Merlot, 10% Merlot, just to kind of hone the tannins of Sangiovese, because this Sangiovese does not come from the old vineyards of the state. This comes from the younger vineyards of the state. So vineyards that I've planted between 1998 and nowadays. What I look into a wine is to be a good companion for my meal. I don't drink wine outside meals. I'm making an exception for you tonight, for you folks. And but typically I'm drinking a scotch at this time of night. So the important thing for me is that the wine should accompany the food. So the reason why I have a high acidity when I like wines with a high acidity is because I like also fat food, you know, and that usually complements very well with that. Of course, the Sangiovese that you taste, that will bring the backbone of acid, the backbone of acidity to the wine. It will bring some of the tannins. The Merlot will give you the little kind of soft core and a little bit more mellowness, especially in the middle palate. Because Sangiovese, it's a varietal that goes this way, so vertically, whereas Merlot, it's a varietal that goes this way, so horizontally. So it goes in way of width more than length, where Sangiovese goes more in the way of length than in width. So in order to compensate this, I use that 10% Merlot. And I must say, this is a good wine, a good starting wine for people that don't know much about Chianti Classico. And this is a good introduction to the category. Every single vineyard is aged separately, as I said, and it will age in different vessels. There might be some wood, there might be some cement. The blending for this wine has been done in large cement vats, and then usually after the blending in large cement vats, which usually happens after a year and a half, 2 years after the harvest, we keep it in large cement tanks for another 4-6 months to blend in, and then we start bottling the wine. Okay, we can follow with the second wine. The second wine is another Chianti Classico. As you remember with Black Rooster. This is a Chianti Classico Reservoir though. Now, the Reservoir, comes from the time of the sharecropping system. Because in the sharecropping system, 50% of the crop will be kept by the landowner, and that applied to wine as well. And so was the wine that the landowner will keep for himself for special occasion, the proprietor reserve. You'll find many Californian wineries that still make nowadays a proprietor reserve. That's the idea behind it. It was the wine that the proprietor will keep for himself and his family, and will bottle it. And it was usually the only wine that was bottled, and it will be drank at a later stage. Here we go. In this case, we have a little older wine, because I believe this is a 2013. So we already have 7 years. and we have 100% Sangiovese in this case. This Sangiovese comes from a specific vineyard that was planted in 2003. It's a southeast facing vineyard on good amount of clay soil. So there's a good amount of clay soil, which usually enhances the tannic structure of the wine. Yeah, definitely more homey for me, in the sense that I feel the Sangiovese, I taste the Sangiovese. Just to show you what Sangiovese looks like, we have a picture of the plant. Let me see if I have it here. There we go. This is the plant of Sangiovese. This is a plant of Sangiovese, and as you can see, this is an old vine of Sangiovese. This vine, it's about, what is today? It's it was planted in 1959. So this vine is about 62 years old right now. You can see she doesn't produce much, but this is what Sangiovese looks like. Beautiful, beautiful grape. Very difficult to raise, in the sense that it's an early blossoming and late ripening grape. Therefore, anything that can go wrong can go wrong in a much larger period of time. The Sangiovese is also a very kind of difficult to. It's not an easy grape to handle. It's temperamental, and it needs to be followed with certain care. You cannot make, for example, large production Sangiovese, because if you make large production Sangiovese, the wine will tend to be watery and very, very tangy. You need to lower the amount, and you need to make just the right amount. Sangiovese usually does very well on porous soil, and in the case of Calcinaia, we have a soil that is heavily calcareous, hence the name of the winery. Calcinaia, calcium, means chalk quarry. We are located in the valley of the Greve River, so there is a river running through the valley, and we are on the left bank of the river, where the soil, as I say, mostly calcareous, and the typical rocks are Alberese and Colombino. Let me see if I have another picture of you can see the type of rocks. No, I don't have it here. I don't have it here. But I can show you something else. I can show you, let me see. Oh yeah, we've talked about the Merlot, and we have a plant of Merlot right here. Here we go. Sharing. Here we go. So this is instead the plant of Merlot. This is a very old plant of Merlot. This was planted in 1967. So completely different behavior in a sense of type of grape, color of the grapes, type of the leaves, color of the leaves. Merlot, on the other hand, it's an easier varietal to make to grow, because opposite to Sangiovese, it's late flowering, late budding, and early ripening. So it's the opposite. So the time from the budding to the bud break to the ripening is much shorter. So you have less chance that something can go wrong, and easier to grow. Does very well on clay soil. The problem with Merlot sometimes that if you make too much of it, then the wine will be kind of not very interesting, kind of flabby. It will never be bad, but it will be kind of uninteresting. Now, for the next wine, we're moving on in the old vine selection. We're moving into the old vine selection, and we will be tasting the Villa Calcinaia Chianti Classico. Now, the Villa Calcinaia Chianti Classico has the family coat of arms on the label. The family coat of arms is black and white, because the first houses that we built in Florence in 1215, well, beginning of 12th century, were next to a church that belonged to the Templars order. And this is what the French called the boson, the banner, the Templars banner. And it's, the Templars banner is black and white. And so it was a way for the family to show their allegiance to the biggest and to most influential order of the area. In case of the Villa Calcinaia Chianti Classico, sorry about that. The blend instead is 90% Sangiovese, 10% Canaiolo. Now, if you remember, Chianti Classico can be 80% minimum Sangiovese, and then you can add 20% of other red varietals. Those 20% red varietals could be international grapes, local grapes, or national grapes, like, for example, Teroldego, Montepulciano Abruzzo. In this case, it's a local grape, Canaiolo. Canaiolo, we have a picture of Canaiolo. We have a picture of Canaiolo. Canaiolo is right here. Here we go. New share. This is Canaiolo. Canaiolo, it's a very pretty grape. It gives a lot of spice and perfume to the Sangiovese, a lot of bouquet. It does not bring much in terms of tannins and acidity. So it's important in the blend with Sangiovese, not so much for what it brings, but what it doesn't bring. It doesn't bring extra acidity, it doesn't bring extra tannin, it brings more mellowness, it brings more suppleness, and it brings more floral and spicy kind of character. This wine for me is our flagship. So it's the most important wine we make. And I would say, I always make this joke, it's like the first date with a customer, okay? The first date with a customer in the sense that, you know, it has to be good because ladies in the room tonight can vouch. And if the first date is not good, there's usually no second date. So it is very important for us that this wine should always be on the spot. And it's one of my favorite wines that I make. I really enjoy this wine. When we talk about food and wine, with Sangiovese, my go-to is always tomato. Tomatoes, like, you know, that's why it also explains why Chianti was so popular with the Italo-American cuisine when the immigration was starting in earnest at the end of the 19th century, because the Italo-American cuisine was based on the sauce. And the Sangiovese does very well with the sauce. So then it's a question of probably of pairing the structure of the wine with the pairing of the dish. But, you know, if you have tomato base, you know, if you have a spaghetti pomodoro, or if you have just spaghetti with tomato sauce, of course, or if you have a veal piccata or veal marinara, you know, and then you find this right Sangiovese that will match or will not will not smother the food, you know, will be a good companion for the food. That's a fundamental part of my way of drinking and of the Italian way of drinking. We drink wines with our meals, and the French as well. Before we move to the next tier, I would like to talk more about the appellation. Let me see if I have the presentation right here. Hold on. Okay, presentazione. Okay, screen sharing. Okay. So, okay, we've talked about this: Tuscany, Florence, Siena, region of Chianti. Then we know that we were told you that the name was of the appellation was delimited in 1716, and the Chianti is the name of the area where the wine Chianti Classico is made. So if you find a bottle of Chianti, not Chianti Classico on the shelf, does not come from the original area. Okay. Sangiovese minimum, 20% and 20% of other red varietals. This is another picture of Sangiovese. Okay, here's where I want to go. This is the pyramid of the 3 categories that you can find in Chianti Classico. So there are 3 wines that you can make in a Chianti Classico appellation. The Chianti Classico Annata, the Chianti Classico Reserva, and the Chianti Classico Gran Selezione. We have already tasted 2 Annatas, which were the first wine and the third wine, and we tasted also Reserva, which was the second wine. On the next 3, we're going to taste 1 Super Tuscan, which will be the first, and 2 Gran Selezione, okay? So we'll start first with the Super Tuscan, which is called Casarsa. Here we go, Casarsa. Again, here we got the cross of Saint Stephen here on the label. The cross of Saint Stephen is the knightly order of the Grand Duchy of Tuscany, which was established by Cosimo I in the 16th century. And the name Casarsa comes from one of the cottages on premise that we bought from the Spirazzano family in 1643. Actually, it was the guy on the back label that bought it, Ferrante Capponi. And it means literally burnt house. Why is it called burnt house? I don't know. It burned. At some point in time it burned, but I don't know when. Casarsa is a wine that I started making in 1997, and it was a mistake in a sense. In 1966, there was the flood in Florence. The flood invaded the city with the water, and all the valley of the Arno was inundated. In the lower part of the valley, there were towards Pisa, where it's more sandy soil, there were all the nurseries, and the nurseries were inundated by the water, and all the name tags were washed away. So in the spring of '67, my father's agent had planned to plant in that year about 14 acres of vineyard. He thought he was buying from the nurseries local varietals. Instead, nursery owners did not have a database, did not know what they had on different vine rows. The vines were there, no name tags. They sold him a bunch of stuff that was not meant to be. He thought he was planting, Canaiolo, Sangiovese, Trebbiano, Malvasia, and instead he was planting Gewürztraminer, Montepulciano, Ancelotta, Teroldego, and this vineyard here. He did not recognize what it was. He thought it was some kind of black Malmsey. Nobody questioned the statement for 30 years. In 1996, I started a research program at the University of Florence, and the research program kind of I was helped by an ampelographer, so an expert on vines. And the ampelographer pointed out to me that was not Black Malmsey, that was Merlot. And I was shocked by those news because I was very adamant in letting people know that I would never plant a single international varietal in my estate. And there it was, planted prior to my birth. So I said, okay, if you can't, beat them, I guess we'll have to join them. So the following year, 1997, I made my first and only Super Tuscan. Mind you, the Super Tuscan movement had started already in the beginning of the 80s. Actually, the first Super Tuscan to be ever made was a Vigorello San Felice in 1971 or 1973, I forget. And but the movement in earnest started in the 80s, and when I started making Casarsa, I was already in his waning curve. So it was not a good marketing decision on my part, but I said, okay, we'll concentrate on this vineyard and we'll make a little bit of this wine, and it's a single vineyard Merlot. Now, I always tell people, Merlot does grow well on clay. This vineyard specifically, it's a northeastern facing, so it's a cooler spot, which is good for Merlot because it does not overripe, and on loam clay soil. So there's a good tannic structure to this wine brought by the soil. And I always tell people that this is a French gentleman who moved to Tuscany back in 1967. He's been living there ever since. So his accent is bound to be a little more Tuscan than French. And I think that shows quite well in the wine. Now going back to our screen, I was telling you about the Gran Selezione level. So this is the top of the pyramid. So consider the production 100% on the pyramid. The annata would be 65% of the appellation. The reserve will be 35% of the appellation, and the Gran Selezione would be 5% of the appellation. Because the Gran Selezione can only be made with your own grapes. Now, in my case, everything I make is my own grapes, so I didn't think that that limitation was enough. And I wanted to put some more content in these wines. And so I decided to basically I chose 3 different vineyard sites, and I decided to bottle them on their own. So in this case, the bottling of these vineyard sites, it's the life of this vineyard site starts like everything else on their own, but if they deserve it, they also finished on their own. Because in that way, I would show people how Sangiovese changes depending where it's planted. Because Sangiovese, it's a very transparent grape. Like the great grapes of the world, like Pinot Noir, like Nebbiolo, you know, they change where depending where they're planted, depending what the climat, which is a beautiful word the French use to describe it as, well, the French description is consecrated land a piece of land consecrated to viticulture. They take things very seriously in France, and characterized by soil type, exposure, inclination of the soil, altitude, and microclimate, of course. So these 5 elements make a climat, and I chose 3 climat. All the different climats are vinified in this way. Let me see if I can find a picture. Here we go. So basically, as you can see, this is La Fornace. This is one of the, we're not tasting La Fornace tonight, but this is how we do it. It's it's an open barrel fermentation. Open barrel fermentation. We do the pigeage, so the push downs are done with the hands and feet. And I have a problem. I have a picture of my son doing this operation. Let me see. Here he is. New share. Here he is. Here's my son doing his push downs. Yeah, you see the black rooster in the middle of his chest. And then these barrels, after primary fermentation, are aged in partly wood and partly in cement. The first wine we'll taste tonight of the single vineyards is going to be the Vigna Bastignano. Vigna Bastignano, here we have it. Vigna Bastignano is a vineyard that was planted by me in 2004 using the material that came from Contessa Louisa and Fornace, two of the oldest vineyards of the state. I have a picture of Vigna Bastignano somewhere. Let me see where I got it. Here we go. This is Vigna Bastignano. Share. Here we go. This is Vigna Bastignano, so it's all terraced. The soil is very, very rocky, mostly alberese, which is this white calcareous rock, and it's all goblet. It's all goblet, so it's the plants are very close, and the grapes especially are very close to the soil. Let me see if I can see. I can show you a vine. Here we go. Here we go. There we are. Here we go. There we are. So you see what that's the plants are the grapes are very close to the soil. Every plant has its own pole, and it's a southeast facing, because the vine lanes are not straight; they curve. They follow the inclination of the hill, and the other important element is 3 sides surrounded by the woods, and also being a loam silt soil, the roots don't have to go really, really deep. to find water because the silt keeps a little bit of water, but it's a very, very rocky soil. So very unfertile. You can only grow vines and olive groves. The wheat does not come well in this kind of soil. But the beauty of the soil is that in the summertime, because of the fact that it's very friable, there's no capillary evaporation. So what it means that you don't lose moisture. You don't lose, even in the droughts of summer, you don't lose moisture, you don't lose water. So the plants are able to thrive throughout the summer. Okay. The character of this Sangiovese is such that there is definitely a tannic structure here, but there is also a lot of spice. That is a typical thing that I get in this vineyard. I get more often than not, I get Flintstone. That's what always kind of, when I do a blind tasting, that's always what the telltale for me to know that it's Vinea Bassignano. It's one Sangiovese that definitely needs time. It's definitely not somebody who is very, I would say, it's like a person that you meet, but in order to get to know him, you need to meet him more times. Not somebody who's opening up, who's kind of very kind of a cordial from the beginning. It's somebody. He may be nice, but he's on his he keeps his a little bit of reserve, and in order for him to open up, you need to get to know better. But I think it's great potential for aging this wine, and when we start pairing with this wines with this kind of structure with food, you need to look at something that has some preparation behind it. So you need to look at some stews, you look at some braised meats. We have a traditional wild boar in Tuscany, so a wild boar stew would be a very good pairing for this, or maybe a brasato, so braised meat using the wine, like you do the brasato al Barolo, you can do a brasato with the Vinea Bassignano. It's really really small production. Of the single vineyards, this is the one we make most of. So we make about 2,000 bottles of this one here on a good year. The other two single vineyards, Contessa Louisa and Fornace, instead you're looking at 1,200, 1,300 bottles. So very limited production. And even the Casarsa is the same thing. Casarsa is about 2,500 bottles, something like that. So you're looking at very, very, very small numbers here. Last but not least, we got the Contessa Louisa. Contessa Louisa, or Countess Louisa, which is the lady in the back label, is my great-grandmother. The reason why this vineyard is called like this, it's because my grandfather planted it in 1959, and he dedicated the vineyard to his mother. And Contessa Louisa is actually a completely different animal from Vinea Bassignano, because it's an older vineyard that Bassignano is. Actually, Contessa Louisa is the mother of Vinea Bassignano, because the Sangiovese of Contessa Louisa was taken to make Vinea Bassignano. And we have a picture of Contessa Louisa. Here we go. Let's do the sharing. Okay, so you see, this is the vineyard, Contessa Louisa. The exposure in this case is northwestern to be precise. It's the only northwestern exposure I have on the estate. And the soil here is much more heavy and clay, and then a type of rock that we call colombino. Colombino means dove, you can translate it with little dove. It's called like this because the color of colombino, the blue, the azure, and the brown reminds people of the plumage of the dove. But it's a very, very hard rock. It's very good for building, but if you hit it with your tractor, the tractor will be the worst after the hit. And the exposure is cooler exposure for Sangiovese, because northwestern we don't get too much hot sun. We get a little bit of afternoon sun, but not too much. And the clay soil gives a lot of structure to the wine. Gives a lot of structure to the wine. So Contessa Louisa will have more a fruity character because Sangiovese on clay usually brings out the fruit. And in terms of this, when you meet this person, it definitely will. It will be more outgoing kind of person. You know, you'll definitely understand his character right away. But it has some punch to it. It has some good structure to it. It makes a very good wine for, again, if you have some meats like some roast meats or some grilled meats. This will be a very good wine to go with it. Let me see if I have a picture of the plants of the Contessa Louisa. Where we are. Sorry about that. Here we go. Yeah, this is the. Let me see if I have another picture here now. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. Yeah, so this is the plant of Sangiovese that I was showing you before. As I said, this is a very old plant, planted in 1959. And the vineyard has been replaced with younger vines. So in order to pick, when we pick this vineyard, we usually pick 2 or 3 pickings, because we go first time for to make the sparkling to get in August, then a second time to pick the old vines, because the old vines usually ripen a little earlier than the younger vines, and a third time to pick the younger vines. So it's a lot of work. The process of winemaking is the same: barrels, punch downs, and then aging in wood, and then we bottle it. Let me see. I want to show you something else. Yeah, I want to show you some old pictures from the old times when the sharecroppers were picking. I have it here. So these are the sharecroppers when they were picking back in the days. These pictures are not that old. These are pictures of the 1960s, roughly. And you see how they had these things called gerle, these baskets, where they will collect the grapes, and then they will put the grapes inside. Here we go. They will put the grapes inside. You see, they'll put the grapes inside of these vats, and then they will carry the vats with the oxes all the way to the winery. Let me show you the winery. Here we go. These are, yeah. So these are, you know, this is the way it was done back in those days. And it was a little more artisanal, of course. It was a little more artisanal. But, you know, I've had some wines from those years. I had some wines from the 68, from the 69, from the 64, and they were absolutely beautiful. So, you know, they were doing, I mean, we probably have more knowledge now, but the soil, the terroir was such that allowed people to make great wines even then. Antoinette, do we have any questions?
We have plenty of questions. Do you have access to the chat box on your screen, Sebastian?
Sure.
So the first one comes from Anne Gregory.
Okay.
In regards to Merlot. So do you typically pick Merlot to add into your Chianti versus other varieties? Or can you please talk us through your decision-making process for which other variety, for other varieties, and how much do you decide to blend in? So basically, how do you choose what you blend?
Well, the Merlot was not chosen by me. I found it, as I was explaining before. I didn't think I had Merlot in my estate, and then when I found I had Merlot, I started making Casarsa, and then I repropagated that Merlot the following year. I made another vineyard. I planted another vineyard in '98, and with and that young vineyard I use for the Pigaya. And I found that blending Sangiovese Merlot, Merlot with Sangiovese, Merlot does not smother the fruity character of Sangiovese, but helps kind of round up and helps kind of mellow down the Sangiovese. Instead, I typically on the old kind of old vines Chianti Classico, I use Canaiolo again for the same kind of reason, because it's a good complement to Sangiovese. It doesn't bring more tannins. I don't particularly like Sangiovese Cabernet Sauvignon blends because I think that Cabernet Sauvignon most of the time tends to smother Sangiovese much and brings even more tannins to the play. And you know, there are some good ones, of course, but most of the times I taste the Cabernet, I don't taste the Sangiovese. With Merlot and Canaiolo, I still taste the Sangiovese. I hope that's a good enough answer.
It's a great answer. And also, how have the blends developed from the time that your father was making Chianti to the time to today? And were those changes because of market demand changes, or was it stylistically within Chianti that?
Well, the recipe of Chianti was codified by Bettino Ricasoli, and there's a letter to Professor Studiati of the University of Pisa in 1872, which describes two ways of making Chianti. It was the Chianti for everyday consumption, which involved 7 parts of Sangiovese, 2 parts of Canaiolo, 1 part of white grapes, Trebbiano and Malvasia. And then there was a second type recipe to make Chianti for the Chianti to age, the wine that was meant to age longer. What happened in the 20th century was basically the recipe that took over was the first one, because both the owner of the land, and the sharecropper did not want to hold on their wine. They wanted to put it on the market as fast as possible. And in order to put it on the market as fast as possible, they needed the white grapes to mellow down the Sangiovese, because Sangiovese, when it's young, can be kind of rustic, can be kind of, you know, with the bit of style and with the tannins. And so the white grapes were used to give a more suppleness and give a little more bouquet. And what has happened in Chianti Classico that when we able to separate from the Chianti appellation in 1996, we adopted the recipe for the aging wine. So we have eliminated all the white grapes and we only allow red grapes because we go on the market much later. We allowed to go on the market after a year, but it's very rare that you see a winery with on the market already after a year. Usually people go on the market 15, 18 months after the harvest. So it has completely changed the way of making wine because we don't need to be in the market so early. So all the white grapes are used for make Vinsanto right now. Trebbiano Malvasia, that's the purpose, is to make Vinsanto.
Excellent, thank you. From Kevin, we have, what is the main impact that the exposure has on grapes in the Chianti region?
Oh, well, it's especially considering global warming. I think my area and areas like Rada have benefited from it because it was harder for us to bring the Sangiovese to full ripening back in the 70s. Because in my area, we are in a valley where the river runs through it. So we have a lot of humidity coming up from the river. And we are mostly on our side of the river, we are on the eastern exposure. So we get the morning sun, we don't get the afternoon sun. In the 70s, that might have been a problem in certain years because if you had very rainy summers and very rainy harvest, it was difficult to keep the grapes healthy. Nowadays, it's turned out to be a good thing because we don't get the scorching sun of the afternoon. So we only get the morning sun, which kind of dries the mildew and it does not burn the grapes. So I can say that you know, this 2-3 centigrades more have helped us quite a bit.
What's
Now it's
interesting
enough.
is,
It's good now.
sorry,
Like this. Keep it like this.
in the photos, I don't know, how has the vineyard management changed for you from the 60s, 70s to today? And has the vineyard management adapted to the hotter climate?
Well, yes, of course. The vineyard management definitely has changed. Not just once; it's changed multiple times. Let's say that when you were in the time of the sharecropping system, it would be unheard of to drop fruit. It, you're coming from a culture where food was sacred and you would not throw it away. So I remember the first time I started talking to my farmers and convinced them to do green harvest. It was really hard to convince them. And we did one vineyard. The first day we did the green harvest, I remember when I got off work, they went back to the vineyard and collected all the grapes that they've cut down in order to make, I don't know what they made, but they didn't want to, probably Verjus, probably you could make Verjus. But it was really hard to make that change of mentality. Nowadays, more than doing green harvest, we try to do other products. In a sense, the reason why I make a sparkling, I make a champenoise method it's new to the market. It's available from the end of last year. Being a geek, I make the sparkling the proper way. So it's a method champenoise. It's a classic method. But it's a way for me to drop fruit without throwing away grapes. So I start making my picking for my sparkling around mid-August. I collect, especially I focus on the most important vineyards for me. And then I get the fruit and I do my sparkling. And then the first vintage that we are put on the market, it's 37 months on lease. And we did the gorgement in 2000, vintage is 2014. The degorgement was December 2018. Yeah. And we had a little bit of Insanto as vin d'expédition, as liqueur d'expédition.
Well, I believe Andre joined the call. So Andre, if you're listening, we're interested in some of that sparkling. So from Max, we have a question. How much do you feel the burden of upholding your family traditions in the winemaking process as opposed to innovating and or bringing in new technology?
Oh, it's a good question. Well, I come from a family of intellectuals. Intellectuals are good at doing one thing, which is delegating. So they basically delegated everything to me when I was 21 years old. I don't have a proper farming background. I mean, I grew up. That's my summer home, and so I not even wanted to own my pocket money. I had to work in the fields or in the cellar, but I have a degree in political science. So the approach I took was kind of learn from experience. Working the harvest year after year, and try different things, try new things. I make 18 different wines. I mean, they hate me at the winery every time I start saying, oh, we should make a new wine with this, so the sparkling, for example, it's the new baby, and but what I did is to preserve all the history. I did this program with University of Florence, so I have a little vineyard in front of the estate which is my library, where I kept all the material that I found in the sharecropper lanes and in the old vineyards. So I have more than 20 different varietals, mostly local, some interlopers, as I explained before. And some of these old varietals are available in the United States. One is called Mammolo, one is called Sanforte, and one is called Occhio Rosso. Occhio Rosso, the first two, Mammolo and Sanforte, are already registered by the university. The Occhio Rosso has not been registered yet. And so we'll start the processing of registering and DNA test. We've already done the DNA testing. So it's a grape on its own. And this year we've planted a little more. We've planted a couple of, maybe half an acre. No, an acre of Occhio Rosso. So we'll maybe be able to make, instead of a barrel, we'll probably be able to make a cask now. So, it's how heavy it is. I mean, we have a lot of stories to tell. We have 800 years of history, and so a lot of stories to tell. And of course, there is a legacy for sure.
And then I know you did touch on climate change, but how has climate change affected the winemaking process for you?
Well, well, it has affected the fact that in the old days, if you're able to get 12 degrees in your wine, you'll be a very happy camper. Nowadays, if you're able to keep your wine below 15, you're a very happy camper. So it has changed quite a bit in the sense that now people try to plant Sangiovese. Before they were looking only southern or southwestern exposition. Now people are looking more for eastern exposition, sometimes even northeastern exposition, because they realize that it's good to have a combination of different exposures, because you don't never know what the vintage is going to be. And if it's, it's very hot, very, very, very hot summer, and you might burn your grapes, it's better to have, not to keep all your eggs in one basket, to have different exposures.
And finally, what kind of scotches do you most enjoy?
Shall I bring the bottles out? I got something here. Hold on. I got something. Let me see. What I have. Okay, so what we got here? We got, well, since we're an American crowd, we got some Whistle Pig here. This is a straight rye whiskey, the simple one. I got Old World as well, which is I think it's the best of the four, or the five now, because now you have also the what do they call it? The one they make. That'll come to me. Anyhow, the red label, I think it's one of my favorite. Then we have some American Pinckney Band from Boone County. That's a good stuff too. Familiar with this? This is New Haven. This comes from New Haven.
Timothy, do you approve?
Beg your pardon?
I'm asking the person who asked the question if he approves or not.
All right. It's a Ben Distillery. Ben Distillery. It's good stuff. I got two of those. I already started with this one here. I haven't started on this one yet, so I'm finishing this one here. So this is my American selection. Then I got, of course, single malts. I'm a big fan of elegance, so I'm more on space side kind of drinker right now. But if I find a good Port Ellen from Islay, that would be a great boon for my night.
And in closing, we have a question about how you are doing, how's your family doing, and how's life in today's environment where you are in Italy?
Well, I never stopped because nature doesn't give a damn about COVID. And so we, the farm continued working actually we're in a very busy time right now because we're, choosing the shoots. And so it's very busy for us right now. So I was going up and down from Florence to the countryside every day. I had to have my permit to go, and and sometimes they stopped me, but it was no big deal. Family's well. Thank you for asking. We're all well. We are trying to go back. People here are trying to go back to normal life. Restaurants will be opening up on Monday. We don't know how many will open because. Well, they decided it's 1 meter now. So there was a big debate on how many meters should be apart. They decided made a compromise as 1 meter. So we'll see how that pans out. So so I think that it's a stop and go kind of thing. They'll start and see how it goes, and then if it doesn't go well, we'll have to stop again. So nothing until we find a cure for this. Bitch, there's nothing else we can do. Sorry, excuse my French.
Well, I can't really speak for everyone here, but I can tell you that you've brought a huge amount of joy and information and lots of laughter to our evening this evening. So, Sebastiano, thank you not only for agreeing to host, but also so generously opening the bottles, tasting with us live, and staying up so late to entertain and share these stories and history and science and knowledge. I'm so happy you come from a family of intellectuals because it rubbed off on you, and that's that's always a good thing. We appreciate you so much, and we look forward to either we visit you in Italy, or when you come to DC, we would love to see you again in the shop.
Please come in. We're all welcome to come to whenever you're able to travel to Chianti, as the English used to call it. And we do have also apartments you can stay in the countryside, and in Florence. You can stay in our palace in Florence. Is right in the center of Florence, in front of the next to the Ponte Vecchio, to the old bridge, and in front of the Uffizi Gallery. It's called Palazzo Capponi, like my family, alle rovinate, which means to the ruin. So Palazzo Capponi alle rovinate or Villa Calcinaia, we'd be very happy to welcome.
And I must tell all of our guests, please, you must know one thing, and that is what we've heard today is maybe 3% of what this gentleman can share with us. So it's really worth a trip to visit the estate and to see everything, because really an hour is not nearly enough time. So again, Sebastiano, thank you very, very much. We're honored. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Antoinette. Thank you.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye,
folks.
everyone.
Good night.
Ciao, ciao.
Have a great one. Take care.